Hey everyone, Nathan Long here, president of Saybrook University, and welcome to another episode of Saybrook Insights. I'm joined today by Dr. Betz King, who I'll introduce more formally in just a few minutes, but I thought I'd opine for a few moments after spending time reading up about her background, specifically on being spiritual while not being religious. Dr. King has a whole focus of her research in this space, which definitely intrigues me, and I'll lead into that in just a minute. About 2005 or so was when I deconverted from Lutheranism specifically and Christianity in general. And the lead up to the whole process was circuitous and a little messy, but a long time coming, to be sure. It all started back in my freshman year in college at the University of Kentucky. No, for those out there ready to pounce and blame some mustache-twirling professor or liberal-infused curriculum, that wasn't it. Actually, the unraveling began as a result of the pastor and his wife. And admittedly, my branch or denomination of Lutheranism was the most conservative or more conservative branch, the Missouri Synod. And for years, my adherence to the faith was unquestioned and unrelenting. I went through Lutheran private school for 8 years. I was learning the catechism. I had memory classes that I had to go through where we memorized Bible verses. I was adherent as they come. And I almost even went to seminary prior to undergrad. I was about this close. And instead I chose a career in music. I digress. That particular moment, that Sunday with the pastor and his wife, started off poorly and just got worse from there. The minister began his sermon as usual, and one of the reasons I liked him was his incredible Shakespearean approach to speaking, delivering opening remarks on the nature of humanity. And then, as was typical for this time, some tangential discussion on politics, but trying to keep it clear, and then he dove off into the deep end, talking about abortion. While it wasn't unusual for this to be a topic in the church per se, I had never in my time growing up in the Lutheran Missouri Synod Church heard such overtly political remarks coming from the pulpit. And despite the church's pro-life stance, throughout our time in the church, my mother, an ardent pro-choice feminist, kindly nodded along, reiterating later the importance of a woman's right to choose what she did with her own body, and we better get on that train. As a family, this was our cognitive dissonance in going to church. But in the 1980s, the political and religious were less entwined in many circumstances than they were in the later 90s and all the way through today. Suffice it to say, this breach, the minister wading deeply into political territory in 1992, was stunning to this once budding seminarian and solely disappointing. It wasn't just that I disagreed, it was like a violation of trust. Moreover, it got worse. I was gobsmacked, that's a word, when he announced that those women who sought abortions were akin to, and he used this word or this phrase, the very whores of Sodom and Gomorrah. Flushed with anger, I gritted my teeth throughout the rest of the service. I relied on the church for a ride back to the residence hall, so leaving right then and there didn't seem to be an option. Still reeling from this experience, I'm trying to figure out how do I get out of here, because I'm done. I need to move on. I went to the Bible study I previously was involved with, in which we began with the Genesis story, specifically the part where Cain murders Abel, and Cain, expelled, goes out of the Garden Eden to live in the land of Nod, and he just so happened to father 9 or more children. I can't remember the exact number, and I just was trying to wrap my head around this and hot with fury over the minister's breach and his labeling of women who had abortions as whores. I decided to dive right into the deep end of that discussion pool, raising the question, which was not wise in this synod or church at the time anyway. So if Adam and Eve were the first humans and Cain and Abel were the first offspring, How is it that Cain goes off to another land, finding a woman to sire children with? Looking at me with the most confused look, she then attempted to explain poorly how this occurred. After pressing her with more questions, others in the group then joined along. And this was not going well for the minister's wife and subsequently for the rest of us. And after the upteenth question, she abruptly ended the entire discussion, announcing that we are not to question God's word. And with this, I indicated I was leaving. No ride back to the dormitory or residence hall in hand. I walked the 5 miles or so to the hall, fuming, and began to scrutinize my faith at length. Over time, this subsided. My religious fervor died down, but I still had my faith largely intact. But that pivotal moment was at the back of my mind for the rest of the 90s and into the early 2000s. In the end, my deconversion came not from a classroom or a professor or an individual, but started with a member of the clergy, his wife, and then a book titled The God Delusion by Sir Richard Dawkins, which I read cover to cover on a flight to an interview in Arizona. At the time, I had been increasingly struggling with what I viewed as existential threats to religion and my faith. Ongoing violence in the name of religion, the increasing political weaponization of religion in American politics and governance, and what seemed a growing dissonance between the ideal life versus the actual lived experiences of those practicing religion. And within a year, I determined that I was no longer a Christian or of any religious faith. I was an atheist. And I started to wear that badge proudly, but it took a while, and it did cause some discomfort for my family, for those in my life who were religious. Fear over my soul, over how our children would turn out, over my own ability to be moral or ethical, all were concerns raised, which, having grown up in a religious community, made sense. And while I embraced my own atheism, I also evolved into a stand of how important it was to honor those with faith traditions. And while at the time that minister and his wife and the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church, there was friction definitely there, today I honor their place in the world. I may not agree, but I honor them, and I do my best in my own way to not denigrate their own existence, but to uplift and to respect their dignity and worth, as well as others who embrace religious tradition, as it's so important to honor their full humanity and how they're living into it. Connected to this was also for me as an atheist an important need for honoring a more spiritual approach. Prior to this, spiritual still always somehow connected with God or religion, but I was looking for a process and a community in which I could be more spiritual. By this, I mean living into my full humanity. While I haven't completely found that process to this day, I have created a ritual practice, essentially a routine that allows for me to lean into my humanity and take a more humanistic approach to those around me. It's truly the beauty of Saybrook University, because this institution has been that for me. Enter Betz King, Dr. Betz King. She's been a long time practicing psychologist from the great state of Michigan, who, along with her now extensive work in emotional support, animal welfare, is an existential humanistic therapist, having done work in this very area of how to live spiritually while one is not religious. I intend to explore this in greater depth with her. Especially, I'm interested in how mental health professionals can support those without a religious home or spiritual orientation, given there's a sizable population of atheists and agnostics and of all other religious and spiritual orientations that aren't necessarily mainstream. And of course, how can we support those from all faith traditions and lift everyone up in the best possible way? Indeed, it's the both and in this case. Of course, I also want to get into the increasing use of animals in supporting mental health, her work in this space, and of course, her perspectives on humanistic psychology in general. We're going to have a fun, circuitous conversation, as a lot of these are, but man alive, this is great stuff. I think you're going to find this super interesting. So let's get to it. with Dr. Betz King. Dr. Betz King, thank you so much for joining me today on Saybrook Insights. Before we get started into the various questions I have for you, I'd like for you to tell us all about your personal journey, your journey into academia to Saybrook University. I'd like to hear a little bit about who you are.
I started out as an energy healer, and I thought I would just do, chakra tuning and things like that for the rest of my life. And then someone was psychotic, and I didn't know what that meant, so I took a few classes, and the next thing you know, I'm at the Center for Humanistic Studies in Detroit, right, studying with Clark Moustakis, the whole qualitative humanistic thing, and that was just my heart's home instantly. So I've just been expressing variations on that for 20 years. Now I have a private practice. I have only humanistic interns in the clinic, and it's a training clinic. And I'm at Saybrook newly. I've been there 6 months. I'm in my second semester. I'm having so much fun. It is exactly like the Center for Humanistic Studies of the old days. It is old school humanist. It bleeds humanistic blood. I can just be myself. I can be out as a pagan psychologist, which is not something I've done before. And it's welcome and it's celebrated, it's acknowledged, it's no big deal. Like, this is so healing for me. So I get to have the experience that so many of our students have when they come, right? And they're accepted for who they are, where they're at, and all their life experiences create the unique self, who's at the root of the whole humanistic journey. So happy to be here.
Well, we're loving it. I get to see glimpses of you on various different committees, and I mean, you're all in, which is just such a joy to see, and I really appreciate that very much. You mentioned this whole thing of you found your home. It's humanistic, the Center for Humanistic Studies. You just knew you were where you needed to be. Why was that? Like, what was it about it that resonated with you in those days? And you kind of alluded to it with Saybrook, but what are some of the specifics around that humanistic ethos that you're talking about?
Right. Well, I thought that you'd ask some kind of an origin question. And so I was like, okay, what's the story? And I can't remember a time when I didn't know I was going to Center for Humanistic Studies. I don't remember how I first heard of it. I don't remember how it came into my consciousness. My memories pick up where I'm going to that school, and I couldn't get anyone at University of Michigan to write me a letter to that school because it was self-directed and pass fail, like no grades and no APA. And oh my God, I wanted to go so bad. And I got someone to write a letter and I got in. And once I got there, it was just all purely about being in the moment, being with another person, being with yourself, being with your clients. It was just variations on presence and being and the truth. Now, these are things that are not allowed in most people's lives, right? You can't be present. You can't tell the truth.
God forbid.
Seriously, like family scripts and stuff prohibit that. And suddenly it was fair game and it was the goal. Oh my goodness, so yummy.
Very transformational, it sounds like.
Every single day, like to this day, it's clearly where I belong, right?
And so, what is it about Saybrook that sets it apart from other institutions from your perspective?
Oh, it's the commitment to old school humanistic psychology. Like the lineage continues. If there was like some kind of psychological apostolic succession, like we can go from the big dogs like right down to us today, like in really great pathways. We thus far don't have much involvement with APA beyond thinking that they're great and we should take their recommendations, but we don't need their accreditation just yet. And that gives us a certain freedom to teach what we feel is important, and not necessarily what is necessary for a particular standard. The whole sort of self-directed learning trajectory with I mean, I'm not going to say it's pass fail, but it's graded in a more holistic manner most of the time. It's not polarized, and it's not. It's somehow like the lived grading experience. Like the whole thing is, it's what humanistic psychology looks like when it is being lived. This is what it looks like if you're teaching it. This is what it looks like if you're a student. This is what it looks like for admin. Like, this is what it looks like in our staff meetings, right? In our faculty meetings and governance meeting. Like, we swim in the sea, and the sea feels like home, and it makes the most sense, and it's what the world needs.
So, why does the world need humanistic psychology? What about it is so powerful?
The allowance for people to be what they are. I don't think Nietzsche said it, but he gets credited with it a lot. Amor fati, become who you are. I would like that as a bumper sticker. That's kind of it in a nutshell. Like, become who you are. There is this you who already is. That's who you are. But you have buried it, and society has buried it, and religion has buried it, and you're going to have to dig your way out and become who you are. That is what the world needs, because right now it's all divided into these false polarities of like good and bad or right and wrong or heaven and hell or body and spirit. Like, it's all simplified and not accurate. And the world needs permission to be authentic, permission to be vulnerable and have that be safe, permission to tell the truth, permission to ask for help. Like, that all falls under the humanistic umbrella. You can just be you.
And in the vein of just being you, I really appreciate your leading essentially with the fact that you felt like and feel like you can be open in your spiritual orientation, as a pagan. And, why is that? I mean, I shouldn't ask why is it so important, but I guess, yeah, why is it important? Because I know, well, we'll get into my own journey because I have some questions for you around that. But why is it so important for you to be able to be out as a pagan in a university setting?
Because first of all, I'm not a Wiccan, so Wicca is a religion, and I am not part of that. I understand it and I honor it and I share many things with it, but I'm just plain old pagan by the dictionary definition of the earth or of the village. Like, whatever the earth is doing, I'm doing that. I mark it 8 times a year. I match whatever the trees are doing. It's very, very simple, but it gets mistaken. First of all, pagan in the dictionary, the first definition is heathen, so it gets that, right? We're heathens. And it's misunderstood. So I get associated with witches, and so I've been in the broom closet, kind of, just because it's too much work to be misunderstood, and I don't want to bring like shame on the university or whatever. The Trump presidency was tough for anybody who was known to be associating with witches, which I probably was. I just didn't mention it, right? I just said earth-based spirituality or something like that. Maybe pagan to those who knew, but to be able to say, well, Drake Spaeth was the president of Division 32, and he was an out pagan, and he appointed me to the board when there was a sudden vacancy. So I didn't run. He just plucked me and sat me down there. And then my president was an out pagan, just talking about it like it was nothing. And I don't know, something like broke free, like melted in my heart, like, oh, this whole facet that I have kept secret, which is really cool. It's okay. Like, you guys want to talk about it? Like, that's okay. Oh my goodness. And people do want to talk about it. And I've met a few, and we've done the secret handshake with each other, and it's really fun.
It's a beautiful thing, right? I mean, when you can do that and not feel lost or so. Yeah, when I first got to Saybrook, I'm actually from the Midwest, not far from where you are, actually. I've been up in your neck of the woods. And as an atheist, I was very much closeted. I was in a community in Ohio where to be an atheist was not great. To be a college president or a faculty member who is an atheist was outright apostasy and terrible. And so I really appreciate how you framed that freeing aspect. That is one thing about my journey at Saybrook where I feel empowered, even, for as long as I'm here and wherever I go next. And I hope our students and faculty feel this way too, that it's empowering. And I know humanistic folks hate the word empowerment, but I think for me, it's empowered me to live into that more freely, to honor my own reality as to who I am and what my faith or non-faith tradition may be. So just an honoring of you for that willingness to speak to that truth for yourself.
Oh, and thank you for speaking to it as well. I got to sit on a dissertation a few years ago on the experience of coming out as an atheist. Just a wonderful learning opportunity for all of us that were involved. And I would say it is a faith. Being atheist is a type of faith.
Yeah, depending on who you talk to, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, yeah, and I think it bucks just like paganism or any of the other non-traditional religions, if you want to say that or use that word. It bucks so many trends, and you're kind of swimming upstream and against the grain, in terms of societal thinking and belief.
But that's kind of in right now, bucking the system and swimming upstream and naming really specific pieces of experience is kind of what's happening right now.
That's right.
We might as well hop in, Nathan. Let's go.
Let's do it. We'll do the Thelma and Louise with our various things there on that one. I think that's great. You really impressed me. I had very little knowledge of who you were. I'll be very honest, and you were one of the first to volunteer on the podcast when I sent out the call, and I just really enjoyed getting to know you. If you haven't gotten to see the website for our audience, you should check out Dr. Betz King online. But I was also just blown away by your scope of work. It's varied, it's unique, and really I think kind of speaks to that humanistic ethos that we're just talking about. And you've done a lot of different things. So we were certainly not going to have time to cover all the areas, but I want to hit some of the big stuff, including your work with emotional support animals and the support of them, along with your other work. Yeah. But I want to spend some time here about this, your work in spirituality, because this is a big one at Saybrook in terms of the transpersonal work that a lot of our students do. A lot of questions arise. And I guess one of the questions when I first came here really centered on the fact that when I hear therapists, because I am not a therapist, most of our folks know this, I'm often marveling at the fact that we talk about God or religion or spirituality in that very constrained context often as therapists. And I still heard a little bit of that at Saybrook when I came in. I think that continues to evolve in all the various mental health disciplines and professions. And what I love about Saybrook is we're always working to be more inclusive and more thoughtful about that. How do we, from your perspective, how are we doing as a profession in psychology, counseling, social work, in addressing this issue of religion as part of the therapeutic process, and more generally spirituality? And I know the two aren't exactly connected, but they're in that sense. But what are your thoughts on that? It's a big question.
It is, but I can see the answer. I think it's as she throws her notes off to the side and rolls up her sleeves.
Takes a big gulp of water.
It's embedded in everything that we do, so it's foundational. But I think we treat it as a cultural consideration, and as a point of unconditional positive regard, right? I have to how you construct your reality and the meaning, like what's running your show, is of importance to me, right? I need to know that to help you. Got to know all the bells and whistles of that. And everybody's is different. We should never assume we know. Even if we think we're in the same club, we might not be. So, spiritual competencies sort of say, hey, you got to get to know this person's thing, which I just think is so much fun. And Saybrook would totally agree with that. Absolutely, you got to get to know their thing, right? For many different reasons. Spirituality is one of them. There's a few other good ones too.
Such as?
The code of ethics would say that you can't treat somebody that you don't know. It's how you're going to build rapport. It's, Roger's CEUs, I call them. It's how you are congruent and empathic and show unconditional positive regard, right? You ask questions. You go, oh my God, was it like this? Did it feel like that? Oh, it must have been this way, that way. And they go, yeah. Or they go, no. But either way, you learn, right? And you connect. And that's all sort of the same thing.
Got it. And so for those who are going into therapy, for example, what advice um, do you have for them who are seeking spiritual connection, but who are not religious, right? So, me, the atheist, or whomever, in whatever.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, this would be part of my intake with you. I would find out how you made meaning, right? There'd be some way that you made meaning or some place that you felt more alive than in other places. So for a lot of people, it would be nature, or for some people, it might be their ancestors, or for some people, it might just be being in really physically good shape, eating the right food, drinking the right water, being the right weight, right? But it's like an organizing nucleus around which everything else would go. And so that's their meaning making thing. I would kind of call it their spiritual center if they were open to that language. If they're not, I still conceptualize it that way and think, okay, well, you need more of that. Like that's working for you. So how do we get you more? How do we articulate what you believe about it, even if you don't know you believe it yet? Like, how does it work? How can you interact with it? So I think whatever they bring becomes spiritual. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's interesting you say that. Don Moss, our dean of the College of Integrative Medicine. I was struck by how he defined it. He's a humanistic psychologist as well in his training and orientation. And he said spirituality is really, it translates into the breath of life. So whatever it is that helps you live your life to the fullest, I think you captured that really well.
Yeah, we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and its root is it is authenticity. That is what it is. There are so many barriers to authenticity in our culture. If we can get rid of all of them, that's what we're left with. And I think that's spiritual.
What does a fully authentic culture society look like?
I think it looks a lot like Saybrook.
Who we are in our existence.
I mean, we're not perfect and we got stuff going on every day. And we get through it and people get degrees and have internships and help others and write papers and have babies and it's all very yummy.
Yeah, they do their life and they live their life in a very rich way. All right, that's cool.
Which is another thing I love about Saybrook because I come from brick and mortar and I'm still seeing how much privilege there is in brick and mortar. Like you have to be able to drive to a building like 4 days a week and everything that's taken care of you somehow it's all taken care of for you, right? Like you can just go to the Saybrook lets you do your schoolwork when you can do your schoolwork, right? But you can still do your life. That's so humanistic.
That is, and I think I'm hearing from more and more students, especially you and I come from a similar tradition, right, with the bricks and mortar background, and I almost wonder if it isn't a privilege anymore. Is it really the privilege it used to be? Um, because there's so many challenges associated with getting to class and staying in class and the way the institutions operate. But I take your point. I think you're spot on. The beauty of Saybrook is that flexibility and adaptiveness to the student and their needs, educationally and socially. So, no, that's pretty wonderful. So, I really appreciate that because I think in terms of your focus on spirituality, I struggled forever to find what kind of the balance of my background was Lutheranism, and I talk about this a little bit in the introduction, but there was that community, that connection I had with other human beings in the church, and when that went away for me and for my wife, but this isn't about necessarily outing her in her own journey, but ultimately I lost that community of those people that knew me, cared for me. I lost I love the ritual. I'm a big ritual guy. So
Yes, yes,
I
yes,
cry
yes.
at commencement. I love the pomp and circumstance. I know some people can leave it, and I can appreciate that too. But it's just that really hits me at the core. And that deconversion process was left a void, and I had to find ways to patch it together. And what Saybrook enabled for me was the freedom to create that ritual, and I'm an administrator, right? So I mean, I'm still a student, if you will, and learning so much from our faculty, folks like yourself, who bring so many beautiful ideas to the table. So I just want to express that level of appreciation to you and to our faculty for what you do for our students and for our administration and our community, because I think that's empowering.
You are welcome, and I thank you back because look at where you're sitting and look at what you're doing. Like it's your whole job to elevate us and make us look awesome, and it looks like you have a really good time doing that.
It's a privilege. It's great to be in that role and to be able to do it.
I know there's other stuff like paperwork, but this part's really good.
Well, the beautiful thing with technology is the paperwork's a minimum. It's now just thousands of emails, as it goes. So tell me a little bit about your work with emotional support animals or in that area, right? I was super impressed by that line of work and kind of some of the areas that you were in. And I laugh because, I remember it was 2004. And I swear to God, I thought this woman bringing her dog on. I'm like, why is this dog on the plane? And she said, it's my emotional support animal. And at the time, I thought that was just nuts. I just did not get it.
Right, somebody made it up. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you and I were talking a little bit before we got started. And I had a shift in my perspective. And I've really seen, we've had some students who have emotional support animals. It's made such a huge difference. And beyond that, some who have really, their animals are assistive in nature in terms of their, blind students or visually impaired, I should say, and the like. So tell us a bit about your journey in this space and what you've done and the research you've done and what you're finding.
That's big too. But it starts with the APA Division 17, Counseling Psychology, and underneath the division they have a section 13, Human Animal Interactions. And so they are sort of doing all of the human animal sciences research, and they're currently free to join. So they have a pretty big body of people. And I was on the board, and I think it was around the time that the crocodile showed up on the plane, the emotional support crocodile, a few other things. People were starting to get a lot of phone calls asking for these letters certifying their dog as an emotional support animal. It seemed like a fair amount of them were about being able to fly for free or being able to be in housing that was no animal housing. Some of them were completely legit, and nobody knew what to do with any of this. And so we just looked at sort of liability welfare and animal welfare. And it turns out to be super complicated. If, as a psychologist, you have a therapeutic relationship with your client and then you flip into a forensic evaluation of them, which is necessary to declare them disabled so that their dog becomes an ESA, now you're forensic and now you're in a dual relationship, and that's not allowed in the Code of Ethics. That's just one piece. What if something goes wrong? Now your relationship is damaged. You put your client in danger. No one ever lays eyeballs on the dog. They just write letters without seeing what the dog is like, how it is in a crowd, can it live in this space, has it ever seen a vet, like all these things. There's just so many things that aren't being taken into consideration. So first we wrote considerations for psychologists. If you're going to write a letter, here are the risks, here's what you need to know, and here's what you need to do. And then a little bit later, we wrote the animal welfare piece, which says, you know what, your dog gets to say if they want to come or not. Like they they have like a union, right? They don't have to work a certain number of hours before they get a break, and they have to be healthy, and it has to be reasonable, and they obviously have to like it and be trained and have all the shots. And so these were things you maybe you want to see. If I'm going to write a letter, say for my client's dog, maybe I want to see the dog at the airport. Maybe I want to see the dog, go downtown with some people. Maybe I want a trainer to come with me. But I need to do my due diligence, right? Because I'm certifying that the dog and the person are, one is disabled and one is able to help. And it's all on me. That's a lot. And we want, and so one of the colleges had a pig, an emotional support pig, on the third floor of the dorms. So the pig had to go up 6 flights of stairs. There was no consideration for that animal's welfare. A pig should not be in a dorm. A pig should not climb 6 flights of stairs. This is happening all over the place because you could just go online and get one of these letters for $50, or therapists are writing them willy-nilly without knowing. So we were just trying to say, hey, don't do that. Don't do that. And if you want to do it, make it your specialty, then do it right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I'm sure, at least from the sounds of it, I guess I'm not sure, but it sounds like there have been serious abuses of this practice, if I'm not mistaken. So, what have you seen as in this space in terms of areas for reform?
Well, if the public could just know that there is no such thing as an emotional support animal jacket, there's no tag. The minute a dog walks in wearing one of those, it's not a real dog. They might be in training with some program that has its own jacket. It'll say the program's name, that'll be obvious. But if it's just a dog in a jacket, like you can buy these little jacket tag combos to make it look like an ESA. So don't fall for that. And disability leader dogs, ADA dogs, don't need any marking at all. They just look like a dog. They got no markings. So stop buying into jackets would be, I think, super helpful for people. And then just thinking about if I have someone who's socially anxious and they feel better if they take their dog with them, I get it. I feel better if I take my dog with me. You know why? Because everyone looks at the dog and no one looks at me. And I worry that that's just perpetuating the social anxiety because no one's talking to me and I don't have to make polite small talk because everyone's looking at the dog. So I'm not sure that I think we have to be really careful that it's not actually perpetuating the thing it's proposed to treat. And it doesn't have to be an emotional support animal to help you with your social anxiety. Take your dog for a walk. Take your dog to the dog park. Go volunteer somewhere with your dog. All of those will work for social anxiety, and you don't need an emotional support animal. So the ESA thing really nowadays is only good for housing because they took it away from transportation. You can't get that free anymore.
Oh, they did. Okay.
Yep, that one's over with. But it might still be okay for housing. But it certainly doesn't say that your dog can come with you hither and yon. That's not true. So I think if people don't understand what's being asked of them, they should consult with somebody who does.
And as I was, as you and I were just talking about, and I mean, it sounds like there's viability in this emotional support animal space. What does the research say about it? I mean, that you've seen so far. I mean, is it efficacious for reducing anxiety for all the various issues that ESAs purport to address?
Anecdotally and not yet statistically significantly enough to say for certain. It's still really super new. It's hard to do research on emotional support animals because they belong to just a person who lives at home with their dog, right? So that's a little tricky for recruitment. So we can hypothesize a lot from the individual pieces, like we know that the presence of an animal increases oxytocin, right? We know all these other reasons why, like, of course they are better with an animal for many, many, many reasons. But the ESA, everybody should do that research. If you are looking for a project, I will help you. We need more research on ESAs because there's not enough yet. There's a lot on animal assisted therapy, but not necessarily ESAs.
ESAs in general, okay. And if you had your druthers, it sounds like, is it fair to say you would like to see a more effectively regulated process around that you all are implementing and seeing that applied universally? I mean, what would be kind of an ideal state in this area? Because there is so much animal abuse out there. There is so much kind of questionable approaches and the need for, I'm not suggesting that folks who have ESAs are abusing their animals, but I think the point is that there can be a real lead to that or a potential for that as a result of overwork and exhaustion, fatigue for these animals that we often don't take into account, I think, in the process. So what's the ideal state from your perspective?
I mean, I tried to make it happen with a couple colleagues. I got with a animal behaviorist veterinarian, Dr. DePorter, one of 22 in the nation, and a doctoral nurse practitioner, a psych nurse. And we thought, okay, here's what needs to happen. The animal behaviorist needs to see the dog in action. the veterinarian needs to clear the dog for medical, and then somebody needs to assess the human as having a disability that the dog could be an accommodation for, and then someone needs to write the report. And by the time we priced that out, even if we dropped our prices so low, it wasn't really affordable to get all of it. Would have been like, I mean, it could still be, but we're like, people don't want to pay $800, $900. They're not going to pay that if all they want is a airline ticket, right, for their dog, or if all they want is housing. But even if they do want it, they can't afford that much. So it's not really cost effective for four individuals to try to get together and do that. It might be that someone could write a grant for a program and the program could do that far more effectively. It'd have to be, you know, a meeting of animal behaviorists and veterinarians and say it would be cool, multidisciplinary. But I think that's what needs to happen if you're going to make an accurate assessment of a person's psychology, how the animal helps, who the animal is, what the animal needs. Like it's complicated, and that assumes a level of equality with the animal that isn't quite as accepted in our society as it will be soon.
You're optimistic. You're thinking soon.
I'm hopeful.
Yeah. Well, you are into animal welfare and animal rights a bit. It seems like. So, what drove that for you? What drives that for you?
I was going to mention to you because you said Lutherans. One of another identity of mine is I'm a child of deaf adults. I'm a CODA, and we got some cred in the movies not too long ago when that movie won some award. And deaf people tended to be courted by the Lutherans. And so most deaf people are Lutheran. And it's not necessarily because they agree with the dogma, it's just that those were the people that put a sign language interpreter on stage or had an interpreting minister. And so they could understand. So they went. So I think, oh my God, Nathan, what was my point? What are we talking about?
We were talking about animal welfare.
Oh, yeah. So, oh, yeah. So the voices for the voiceless. Yeah. So as you know, my parents were deaf, and deaf people don't have a voice, right? And so I've just been acutely aware of that my whole life. And animals are the same way. They don't have a voice, although both can communicate in ways the mainstream population doesn't understand or take time to learn. So there's a lot we miss in animal behavior, and we could do more to accommodate deaf folks if we wanted to. So I think I've spent my whole life trying to voice the voice, you know, even in individuals in therapy, right? You might come in with a dominant personality, and I'm over here trying to give voice to, you know, your shadow part that keeps clobbering you when you're not looking, right? I just give voice to the voiceless, I think.
That's very interesting. By the way, your story about Lutherans and deaf folk, deaf individuals, I did not know that. I guess I didn't connect the two. My former church had a sign language interpreter on stage or at the near the altar. Not all Sundays, but a lot of Sundays. That now it all comes together, and like I guess I did not realize that. So interesting, yeah.
And so when you were talking about the pain of losing your community when you had to leave or chose to leave, I was thinking, well, if they didn't have that to go to, where would they go? Like that would be really painful for them. That's the only place that thought to interpret God on their behalf, right? That's an important place. And what if they couldn't go there anymore? That would be sad.
Yep. No, that's really helpful to hear that and to process that. So thank you. Well, as we kind of wrap up, this went fast. I really feel like we had to chunk this a bit because there's a lot more we could talk about your work with women in psychology, your existentialist background. I'd love to have you back to have a deeper conversation in those spaces. For those who get a chance, it's a treat to read Dr. King's website. Betz, before we start to get into the final two questions, the quick takes, if you will, I'd like for you to just talk a bit about your experience in the psychology or clinical psychology program and describing for students. You did such a beautiful job of describing it early on, like in a very global way. What could a student expect as they come into a Saybrook clinical psychology program? What does it look like, feel like for a student from your perspective as a faculty member?
Yeah, thank you. Because I'm pretty new too, so I can speak to my experience along with everyone else's. I think nobody is prepared, most people are not prepared for how seen they will be. You will be seen for who you are, with great clarity by all kinds of wise and wonderful people who will reflect that back to you. And if you're not there yet, that can be startling. So buckle up because that's awesome. And get ready to read a lot and write a lot and give yourself way more time to read and write than you think you need because you need that much time. And just open your heart rather than close it whenever possible and breathe in instead of like holding your breath whenever possible because this can be such a ride of personal transformation in service of planetary transformation. Like, there's nothing better. But I mean, when it gets this good, it's not easy. But every single person is here because they want to be, not because they have to be. And we want nothing more than to see everyone succeed. So this is who you want to do it with.
Amen to that. Yeah. Amen to that. That's beautiful. And so as folks are applying to the program or considering applying to the program, what are a few like two or three pieces of advice from you as a faculty member? What should they think about?
They should think about the intersectionality of authenticity and too much information.
Okay.
We want to know your authentic story, and sometimes two or three sentences about that is enough, and we don't need like 4 paragraphs because that's just not necessary. So, authentic and appropriate. We want to hear about every amazing thing that you're doing for your community, for the people that you love, for the students that you teach. However, you're helping, write that down. And then all the usual things like what are you going to do with your degree? How are you going to change the world? But I think you want your letter to stand out, right? You want it to read differently than all the other letters, which means you have to take a risk. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be you. That's your best shot is to be you. You're going to fail at anything else, but to be you appropriately and like in your most grown up voice.
God, that's just
Is that what you're looking for?
I think that was terrific advice. I think that could apply to just about any of our programs. That was really super fabulous. So, uh,
Nice.
yeah, I mean, I haven't been able to articulate in such a really fabulous, great way the be authentic but be brief. Like that's hard to do,
Yeah.
but even myself, I struggle with that. Right? Like I'm trying to be authentic, but I can go on and on. So we all work through that. That was brilliant. Yeah, brilliant,
Thank
brilliant.
you. You're very kind.
Well, so we have two quick take questions before you leave today, and I'm sad that you're leaving because I would love to do this for a long time.
I will come back, I promise.
Okay, all right, all right. We'll count on it. So the two questions we'll start with: what does it mean to be humanistic to you? And you've already kind of answered this in a number of ways.
Yeah, to me, to be humanistic is a courageous act of authenticity. Uh, it is the act of becoming who you are, and that means knowing your shadow and your stuff and all the stuff. It's not spiritual bypassing. It's becoming who you are and chipping away all the things that don't serve and helping other people do the same because like I said, that's the only thing we're going to do successfully is be ourselves. We're going to suck at everything else. So we might as well figure this out. And the only way we're going to figure it out is by doing it wrong. And we are such a shame-based culture that we can't be wrong anymore. We need to remember how to be wrong so that we can be imperfect, so that we can try new things, fail, figure it out, try it again, get it right. Like, that's how it works.
Out of failure has come so much greatness, right? But yeah, you're so right. We're so shame based that any failure is seen as a
It should be celebrated, right?
yeah, yeah.
Chitty chitty bang bang. From the ashes of disaster grow the roses of success.
Amen. Yes, Doctor.
There is no truer line.
Oh Well stated. Well stated. All right. What are the 3 things our audience can do right now to improve or enhance their mental and emotional health?
Well, that was one. So we've got to stop buying into the paradigm of shame. Okay, shame loosely defined as there's something wrong with me versus guilt, which says maybe I did a wrong thing. I can learn from it and grow. Okay, shame doesn't exist. It's imposed by structures usually who want to control through manipulation. And we have to quit believing that our authenticity is shameful. So get rid of shame.
Gone. All right.
Get rid of all duality. Can I say that? Get rid of this idea that there's only 2 options, like right and wrong, good and bad, heaven, hell, body, spirit. Like, it's not that simple. There's more than 2, right? There's black and white and like 14 shades of gray, and they're all valid. So let's stop believing that there's this either or, and let's get the word and. So I give you the word and. And then the last one is that we have to stop thinking that we have to know everything. We have to get better at being vulnerable. We have to, did I say this already? We have to think that being vulnerable is courageous. We think that putting up like a front and not letting people know that we're weak or that we're scared or we're confused or we feel inferior, that is the courageous thing to do, right? Fake it till you make it. It takes maybe more courage to just say, hey, I'm scared, or like, I don't like how this feels, or I don't know what's happening, or this is not okay. That takes way more courage. It also gets you better results because you stand a chance of getting your needs met. But our culture does not want to be vulnerable. And I think we need to reclaim that as a fierce act of a spiritual warrior. I don't know. That was kind of hokey, but I was trying to end big.
I like hokey, and you ended just awesome. That was beautiful. Dr. Betz King, one of our newest and fabulous Saybrook faculty members out of the humanistic and clinical psychology department. Really, golly Moses, what a great experience having you on today.
Golly Moses.
Golly Moses. Well, that's my Ohio coming out. Rural Ohio. So sorry about that.
I recognize it.
Golly Moses. What books, articles, or recordings do you want to direct folks towards?
It's not out yet, but it's going to be soon by Lewis Hoffman, one of our existential greats. He is publishing something to the effect of the existential humanistic and the handbook of humanistic and existential psychology, the handbook of. It's going to be 2 volumes, and I'm co-authoring a chapter with another Saybrook alum, Veronica Lack of the Herd Institute, and she and I have proposed a new model of existential humanistic animal-assisted psychotherapy.
Wow.
So coming soon to the APA and Saybrook.
Awesome.
Plus my website, betzking.com.
BetzKing.com, and then they can also find you at Saybrook University.
Absolutely.
And the faculty search. Yeah, there we go. Betz, it's been a pleasure.
Nathan, holy Moses, Nathan, so much fun.
We're going to do it again, right?
Please.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you.
Thank you, Nathan.
All right, folks. Well, thank you very much again to Dr. King. I really hope you enjoyed Betz as much as I did. What a fabulous conversation. Remember her 3 major takeaways. And I love these. These are terrific. Stop buying into the paradigm of shame. Get rid of the fact that there's only 2 options. Nope, there's shades of gray everywhere. And number 3, stop thinking you or we have to know everything. Be vulnerable, because being vulnerable is courageous. And indeed, I think that vulnerability is something we embrace here a lot at Saybrook, and we're proud to be vulnerable. If you want to see the fabulous YouTube video segments I'm using that word a lot, fabulous, aren't I? But it's true, they're fabulous. Fabulous with a capital F. Mr. Phil Jean Grande has created these, and they are awesome. Go to our Saybrook YouTube page. And if you'd like to support the podcast, go to Apple iTunes, leave a 5-star rating and review, and subscribe so you can get episodes as they come out. If you're on Spotify, leave that 5-star rating and make sure to follow us. You can, of course, subscribe to us on most major podcast platforms, including Google, Stitcher, Pandora, and others. Remember to check our show notes for information on today's guest, including links to websites, etc., and books by Dr. King. And for more about our clinical or humanistic psychology program, or both, go to the university's website at www.saybrook.edu. Click on Areas of Study at the top of the page and locate the program to learn more. Or simply Google Saybrook University Psychology. That's it, everybody. Thank you so much for your time, for being here, for being with us. I hope you are learning every day and taking away some fabulous, there's that word again, thoughts and insights from this program. Take good care.